Hi, my name's Sitali, and in this video I'll be doing a commission for Tsand. As this is a time-lapse video, it does contain fast-moving and flashing images. For this, I'm drawing a copper anthropomorphic dragon, and it had been quite a while since I'd drawn any humanoid or anthro type characters, so this was a lot of fun to do. I did struggle a little bit with perspective, but I really wanted to push myself to try doing perspectives more and make more interesting and dynamic pictures, so I was quite happy when I did finally manage to pull it off and get the sketch down to the right proportions that I wanted. As some of my older subscribers may remember, that I had an issue with my tablet where it would do strange things and eventually would just become impossible to draw with. Unfortunately, it has reared its ugly head again. I think it's because of the sheer number of projects I have. At the moment, I'm doing avatars for Day of Dragon Patreon members, and I'm basically doing like 7 to 8 in a week and making time-lapse videos for all of them. And so by the end of the week, my tablet's quite full of videos and images and projects, and every time I opened this file, which was a lot larger than the smaller avatar files, it would just not work well. Not as bad as I'd seen in the past, it just would not allow me to use the pen in any of the sidebar options, so instead I'd have to keep going between using my pen and using my fingers to open things like the layers option or move the slide bar up and down, which I found quite awkward because obviously my fingers are a lot bigger than my pen, and it made it harder for me to choose precise colors or precise sizes. Nevertheless, I continued on, and I have now taken to doing weekly cleanups of my tablet where I offload everything onto my PC and delete all project files on my tablet. This doesn't mean though if I need to return to anything, I actually have to re-download it to my tablet and reopen the project file to be able to make any changes. So I'm trying to make sure not to offload anything until I'm 100% certain it is finished with. Now, despite the difficulties, I was very proud of how this picture ended up and how it's going, especially at this stage of the picture where I'm starting to do the shading in grayscale. I'll add the color later, but just defining the muscle structures around the chest and the neck. I just felt like, even though I hadn't drawn anthro stuff in a long time, I felt like for me, I nailed the anatomy on this one. It's something that I often struggled with, so I was quite happy with how this looked. It does get a bit covered up with the scales and stuff, and some people might wonder why I bothered doing all of this definition just to cover it up. But I think it's important to know the underlying muscle structure of something before you put the scales on top, because then you know how they should be following the form rather than just sort of drawing blobs, I guess. Anyway, it was good practice and I really enjoyed doing this, so yeah, it was fun. I did spend 5 hours on this commission. Most of that time is spent with shading. There's a fair chunk of time spent adding the color and then combining the layers and recoloring some sections, but I do spend very little time on the background on this one. It was kind of done on purpose, as 5 hours allowed for a fairly well-defined character, but I wanted most of the time to be spent on that character, so we just went with a very simple background, which pretty much only took me a few minutes to finish up near the end of the video, and all of the time that had been paid for was mostly spent on the character itself, which is the important part of the picture. Now don't worry, it is gonna have wings. I have just decided to split the body from the wings just to make it easier to shade the body to like separately to the wings. I just find it easier because with the amount of space the wings take up at the back of the picture, I'd find it sort of hard to define the curvature of the waists and the arms. I don't know, it's just easier for me if the wings that are quite behind the dragon are on a separate layer. I do combine them all together at the end before doing my final passes on color, but at the moment my character or the character and the wings are on separate layers. I did also decide I was doing this picture too small, so you will see me make a small adjustment to the size to make it a bit bigger so that you can have a more detailed view of the face. I think this broke my tablet more, and in the end I actually end up saving a copy of this file and deleting the original file as it did not like me changing the size at all. Now, I guess the only part I really struggled with was right at the start with the sketch. There was actually a sketch I didn't record that was sort of like a warm-up sketch. It was absolutely horrible, so that just got deleted entirely. So, I mean, normally in any of my videos you watch, there's some point where I go, oh, I struggled with this or I struggled with that. It is the sketch at the start. The rest of this went pretty well, surprisingly. As said before, I was quite happy with how their shading on the body went, and because that's the basis of the whole drawing, like everything just builds on that, because I got that right fairly early on, everything else just sort of followed suit, and the colors were a real joy to shade. Like, I really like the bright wing colors and like mixing in some of the color reflecting onto the body and that kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff I love to do. I also mixed in some, you'll see in a minute, I mix in some pink into the wing color because when the light passes through the wings, it would be passing through the blood veins and stuff there and would allow for a slight pink or red tinge as the light passes through the blood flowing through the wings. So if you're wondering why the wings aren't just completely blue and green, that's why, because it's the sort of subsurface scattering passing as the light passes through the wings, and you can see the sort of blood flowing through them. I should also probably mention, for those of you who don't know or haven't noticed, I do actually shade in grayscales to begin with, and then I create a color layer above the grayscales just for freedom of mixing colors and sort of defining forms before colors are involved. So if you look to the left, you will actually see there are two layers involved here. There's the bottom grayscale layer, and then above it there's a color layer which has a clipping mask applied to it so that the colors only apply to the layer directly below it. And that's basically how I color all my pictures now. I do merge them together at the end and add some final color adjustments with a paintbrush, as there are some things I can't quite get the colors right when I do things this way, but I do find that my shading ability has improved dramatically using this method, so I think I'll continue to stick to this method as long as it makes my art look better. I started adding these little scales along the arm, but in the end I decided they didn't quite fit. I don't know, it just didn't suit it properly, and I don't know, it made it a bit busy. I think closer to the end of the video I had some scales back on again that look more natural, but these ones, I don't know, they kind of just make the skin look lumpy, pimply, like it's covered in warts. It didn't look like scales, so I do actually paint over these and do better ones later. There we go. These scales look much better than the ones I had before. I like these sort of long, overly shaped scales. I think they flow with the body better and they look better. And I didn't put as many on either, so it kind of fits better. So I'm pretty much done with the shading. I now switch to focusing on the color and making the color adjustments and making sure the colors are in the right places. So you'll see me referring to the reference picture a fair bit to make sure I've got the colors I need, and I will be merging the layers pretty soon so that I can make my final color adjustments and paint over any areas I need to. I also need to add these copper, that sort of greeny copper thing that, you know, that thing that copper does, oxidizing, is that what it's called? Anyway, it looks cool on this dragon and I enjoyed adding these bits of color. So yeah, I added these on and then merge the layers together and start my final pass. Yeah, I almost forgot I did this. I still, despite being better at pushing my values in the shading stage, I still sometimes don't make my shadows dark enough. So I'm just adding another shadow layer. This is a multiply layer above the color layer, and I just sort of roughly paint it and then erase back the areas that should be in light. I do turn it down quite considerably, but I do still think it adds quite a bit to the picture. Once I'm happy with how light and dark this layer is, then I merge it onto the character and continue with the painting and the final adjustments. I'm about to do the background, so it's just a very simple background, but I did want to define these bits of grass a bit more, even though they're going to be blurred. If you blur them and they've not been defined very well, they just kind of look crappy. So I do spend a bit of time defining these blades of grass and like adding little chunks out of them so they look a bit more realistic, and then they will be blurred as they're quite out of focus compared to the character. And then I'll do some better clouds, so I just use what I've done with the clouds as a base, and I get my cloud brush and I do some smudging and add a bit more here and there, and make the clouds look more like clouds and less like rushed paint smeared across the screen. I quite like how these clouds ended up. I didn't spend very long on them, but I think I mentioned in some of my other videos, my cloud brush is really good and it makes making clouds really easy and not a chore at all. Where I used to hate doing it before, I actually really like doing it now. I then add a final lighting layer as I did sort of want the sun to come through. Then I realized I had the sun coming from two different directions in my picture, so I had to flip the sky and have the sun coming from the correct direction, as it is always important that you have a constant light source. You know, you can't just have it coming from a different direction suddenly in your shading. So I'm glad I noticed that before I added the final lighting layers. I did save 3 different versions of this, so one with the sunlight layer and one without, and also just the dragon without any background at all. And this is done. So thank you very much to Tsand or Tsand. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce your name. Do correct me in the comments below if I got it wrong. Thank you so much for commissioning me. This was lots and lots of fun to do. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed drawing it. Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!